I have a lot of goals in life. One of them, though, is not to lure men to my house with the promise of nudity, and more nudity to come, only to then let them, take an unexpectedly long swim in my indoor pool? And that's before their insides are ripped out and end up on a sluice trough. Good old sluice troughs. Say that 5 times fast. Look, if that happens in my life, I'll roll with it. It's just not a goal. But a goal I do have is to help out our sponsor and see if we can't get them some more business. Great segue. And that sponsor is called Spark Plug Coffee. They offer you the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in Canada. You can snag decaf or half calf if that's your preference, and you can peruse their assortment of blends and roasts. Shake things up and go with one of the seasonal blends that rotate through the seasons. Customers in the United States and Canada, not Scotland sadly, Scotland, will get what they order within a week. Canadians will even save some money because they don't have to pay anything for shipping. But let's save you even more money. How will we do that? Well, you can set up a membership in Sparkplug's Autopilot Coffee Club. You will get perks, you will get deals, and you will save money on every order. In fact, Sparkplug is cool with you customizing your membership to only get orders when you're ready for them, not just whenever they're sent automatically. The website you should be eager to seek out is sparkplug.coffee/HYES. No nudity there that I'm aware of. Maybe there is. That HYES discount code will save you 20% off your next order, but that's a one-time only offer. Sparkplug.coffee, folks. So that business has been transacted. Let's see what the deal is with this odd little movie. Bev, cue 'em.
And action! Have you ever seen
Under the Skin? Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for downloading or streaming episode number 612 of the Classic Movies podcast we call Have You Ever Seen? Careful, today's movie will be fully spoiled. At least we hope so, we'll try. I'm the bad man who rides around on a motorcycle, enabling an alien succubus, Ryan Ellis. I looked it up, that's what she is, a succubus.
Oh man, we have to tell Chef his wife is a succubus.
And here's the female, quote-unquote, female, who wears a crappy black wig to lure horny men into her domicile so they can go skinny dipping. My wife, Bev.
That's me.
With full-on erections. At least that one guy did have one.
Very X-rated.
Because this movie must be a hard R, right?
That's got to be NC-17.
Oh, right, and she's naked repeatedly.
As soon as there's full frontal nudity, especially male nudity, I think that might get you an R, but if you have an erect penis, that's NC-17.
And
it's probably, unrated.
And ScarJo being naked as often as she is. Well, let's just see right now. Hang on a second, I'll click back in the IMDb from my full cast page there. It is 14A.
What? Really?
Well, that means it's R.
I'm surprised it's not NC-17. I can't believe we're jumping right out. The beginning of the podcast.
This movie did not trend the way...
Talking about erect penises. Sorry, carry on.
It didn't trend the way you thought it might, considering there was nudity. I remember when Maria Bello had pubic hair that was shown, and I guess maybe genitalia, but at least her pubic hair was shown. I think she was topless. In The Cooler, a movie that was fairly small, but Baldwin got his only Oscar nomination for that, and William H. Macy's the main character. But Macy and Bello have sex, and it's this whole thing about how, oh my God, you saw pubic hair. And apparently she was asked that question by the media constantly. And then here you get Scarlett Johansson, fully naked, repeatedly.
It's
and I was reading
remarkable,
online that it wasn't that big a deal to people, which is shocking.
And she was a bona fide sex symbol. I don't know that she does full frontal nudity in any other film, even partial nudity. And yeah, it's so strange that nobody really talks about that with this film. But even though some of those scenes, they're sexual in nature, but it does go to show, I think, how much the filmmaker's choices go into making nudity sexual or not.
It is not sexual.
The two scenes where she's really fully frontal, they're not sexual at all. One, she's just changing clothes. It's the introduction. It's the first time we see her. And the second one, she's examining herself in the mirror. The sex scenes, you do start to see more skin, but it just
it's not a turn-on.
Isn't sexy. It's ominous instead. The camera really doesn't objectify her ever.
All right, the coming attractions opinion question for this week's movie, Under the Skin. I ask this of the works of Jonathan Glazer, who's only directed 4 films in total, and we've seen them all in the past not even a year. Just coincidentally, we wanted to see Sexy Beast. You'd never seen Birth, and we saw Zone of Interest, of course, for the Oscars, and it's worth seeing anyway, but we saw it because it was a big Oscar nominee and a winner. So who do you think gives the best lead performance in one of these films? Ray Winstone in Sexy Beast, Nicole Kidman in Birth, Christian Friedel in The Zone of Interest, or is it Scarlett Johansson in Under the Skin?
I think you could probably make an argument, honestly, for any of these performances, but for me, it's easily Christian Friedel. He's the man in charge of Auschwitz. he's evil not because he's a sadist or even necessarily an anti-Semite, as far as we know, but evil because he's just particularly talented at turning off that critical part of his brain that gets between himself and success. And it's probably a very strikingly realistic and prolific type of evil. And I loved Sandra Hüller in that movie too, but she's a more straightforward bad guy. But the success of the film really hinges on Friedel's performance. He turns just one of the worst villains you can imagine into somebody we all recognize.
We never see the Holocaust per se. That's a big factor in that movie. And I've only seen that once, and I guess you've only seen it once too. Mm-hmm. We will see it again one day, but I've seen the other movies at least 2 times. In this case, Under the Skin 3 times. I say Kidman probably has the hardest job of the 4 leads to make it believable that she's falling in love with a kid who tells her he's the reincarnated spirit of her dead husband. And Winstone has to go against type by basically being a pathetic punk who gets bullied by Gandhi. Yes, Grosvenor! And all that Ben Kingsley stuff. Still, I'd go with Friedel and Sandra Hüller as well, but Friedel especially is the lead in The Zone of Interest, partly because I think that's Glazer's best movie so far. As for ScarJo, she's fine, but I think she brings up the rear of these 4 leading performances. I looked at some of the people they considered, and I like ScarJo. I respect her. We've covered her quite a few times now, but I'll mention these names in a few minutes, and I think that there or would have been maybe better choices.
I love her performance in this movie. I think she does a perfect job. And I think there's moments of subtlety and depth in her performance that the movie could not live without.
Which of these 4 movies do you like the best, though? His films?
Oh, Under the Skin.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite.
For me, Zone of Interest.
Yeah.
All right, Alien ScarJo was shown at all kinds of festivals in 2013. Then it rolled out 10 years ago in April and May of 2014. Jonathan Glazer's flick was not a financial success. It only made about half its budget back. Although we tried our best to help it out. We saw it on the big screen when we were visiting New York that spring.
Oh, yeah, we saw it in New York.
During the opening week.
It was like Midtown that we saw it too, so it was so surreal to see this
Small
movie
theater.
that breaks your brain, and then we just came out in downtown New York City.
And I was also very tired. I missed a lot of it. It wasn't the movie's fault, but I was exhausted. I don't know why I was so exhausted. We were on vacation. Still, I know I missed some of the movie because I fell asleep. But Bev, well, the movie has been around for a full decade. The story isn't that well known to the average person, partly because the average person didn't even see this thing in the first place. Let us all know what it's about by giving us the skinny on Under the Skin. Under the Skinny.
Scarlett Johansson is an alien wearing the skin of a beautiful human woman to lure the men of Glasgow to a liquid abyss where they're processed to be eaten. Then one man inspires mercy in her. She lets him go and takes off to the Highlands. There, she's helped by a kind man, but abandons him after she discovers she can't have normal intimacy with him. So she retreats to the forest, where she's attacked by a logger trying to rape her. The logger stops when he accidentally tears off her human skin, revealing the alien underneath. Scared, he douses her with gasoline and sets her on fire. She dies in the forest, and her ashes mix with the falling snow.
And then the movie ends. Of course, the key thing you didn't mention is the motorcycle man, the bad man.
He's there, but he's more of like an ominous threat than an actual force of plot.
And one of many people, I guess almost everybody in this movie, who's not an actual actor. He's a motorcycle, I guess professional motorcycle driver.
Yeah, professional like racer, because they wanted somebody who could really fly through those twisty-turny roads.
The Scottish Highlands.
Yeah.
So he's an actor in this, but almost nobody, well, I guess maybe, what's his name again? Adam Pearson?
He's an actor.
Yes. He's in the Sebastian Stan pick that comes out later, I think soon actually, the 20th. It would have been out, I guess, on Friday. And it's called A Different Man. So Sebastian Stan plays a guy who has facial reconstructive surgery, I guess. And then this guy plays him in the movie or something. Adam Pearson plays him or something. And then it's a whole drama. I don't know. I don't know much about the movie. Well, anyway, the nutshell for Under the Skin. She doesn't have genitalia, and she can't eat cake. No wonder she doesn't really seem too worked up when she's lit on fire and about to die. It's like that line in Donnie Darko about the Smurfs when Donnie says, "What's the point of living if you don't have a dick?"
I have a dick. I guess there's no point
The reverse for the lady. You get the gist there. And can't eat cake just to spit it out. I guess because it's not on the sluice trough. All right, so the numbers on Under the Skin are pretty solid. Well, actually, one's not so good. We'll get to that right here. 84% of critics like the film. That's fine. 219 fresh, 43 rotten. The average is 7.9 out of 10. Nothing wrong with that at all. But only 55% of audiences. So that is a splat on the tomato meter for the audiences. Probably came out of it saying, what in the world did I just see? I'm guessing a lot of it.
I'm going to go see the new Scarlett Johansson horror film. Yeah.
Horror, sci-fi, obviously. And Glazer's other 2 movies were fairly straightforward. Birth maybe weirded people out, but it was a pretty simple concept, and Sexy Beast wasn't anything like this.
No, they're actually a really straightforward crime film. It was similar to a lot of really popular movies that were in the theater. It would have been considered indie, but it was certainly a straightforward movie.
Zone of Interest are the best reviews for Glazer so far in his 4 films he's done. Sexy Beast is number 2. Birth was a splat, the only splat he has of the four, and this is, of course, third best. The film was 173rd at the 2014 U.S. box office. Gone Girl was 18th. We covered that a couple months ago. Birdman, the Best Picture winner, was 78th. And Whiplash, my favorite movie of that year and of the decade, was 125th. This was up for many awards, including some BAFTAs, but got no Oscar nominations. Maybe should have got at least one, and I'd say for the sound. Very worthy. Yeah. They won for the sound for Zone of Interest, which was so key because you don't see the Holocaust stuff, you just hear it.
I think this film uses sound really well, but the same techniques of really using perspective in a big way with sound so that you're wherever she is.
Kubrickian, or also I would say Lynchian.
There's no question he's heavily inspired by Kubrick.
And I'd say by Lynch.
Yeah.
The film was 61st on BBC Culture's list of the 100 greatest films of the 21st century so far, which I think was 2016, so it's been quite a while now, but still 61st. And this was tied for 169th on the 2022 Sight and Sound list. That may not sound that great, but a fairly new movie that not that many people saw, with one actor anyone even knows. And yeah, she's a big name, but there's nobody else in this. And it's not like the director's that big a name to the average person, so that's pretty impressive that it ranked on that list, even 169th. Well, you said you love it. Let's hear some more.
It's a work of art, and I think it's one of the best films of the 21st century. It may not necessarily make my top 10. I actually went back and looked at our top 10 of the decade, and it was one of my runner-ups, but I'm kind of looking at my choices going, you know
runners
what?
Up?
My runners-up, yeah. I think I would rank it in my top 10, having seen it 3 times now.
On behalf of the film, you'd bump out, why don't you like me anymore?
Oh, I would bump out Wolf of Wall Street.
Why don't you like Wolf of Wall Street anymore?
I love Wolf of Wall Street, so it would be like my 11th favorite film of the decade, you know? I love that movie, but I don't know, this one... I hate to say it, but it really gets under my skin. But it really does. Oh my God, there's just something about this movie. I could never put my finger on what the magic is exactly, except that Jonathan Glazer is just a singular artist.
He's a terrific filmmaker.
A vision unlike anyone else and real guts. I guess he probably makes a fortune. He works on a lot of ads. And I mean like big, high-profile ads. He does work for the biggest companies. Big fashion names, project for Apple. I'm sure that he makes incredibly good money doing that, and then he really just works his passion when he's making feature films.
4 movies in nearly a quarter of a century. That's Spike Jonze-esque as far as rarely working.
And Kubrick-esque as well, especially the later his career when he was less prolific.
Yeah. I'm going to go to my wrap-up section to give you my thoughts on the opening, or near the opening, actually, because I think it might apply to where we can go with this. There are shots in some movies that stick with you forever. And the one where ScarJo peels her skin off at the end, like you say, when the logger douses her in gas. Well, I guess that comes after she's peeled her skin off. Anyway, and looks at her own face in this movie is one of those. As are the times when the men get lured into that water abyss thing. They're just so surreal and weird, and they look like they're more complicated than they probably really were to shoot, but they look like they're impossible to shoot, and probably wasn't that hard. As for Glazer, he may not be Kubrick, but he might be this century's David Lynch, like I say, especially when it comes to how odd his movies are getting as he goes along. This and Zone of Interest. This is weirder, but Zone of Interest is also pretty weird for a Holocaust film. Plus, he likes a creepy sound design, just like Lynch, even more so than Kubrick, although Kubrick 2001, this reminds especially of that film. It's an impressive motion picture. I also find it to be very clinical, which isn't a bad thing exactly. 2001 is too. I guess the Zone of Interest is clinical too, but that just grabbed me more than this did, even after 3 viewings of this now. But I do find it to be very interesting, and I don't mean that the way Hollywood people always do when they don't like something. That was interesting, John. No, I do find this interesting. I find it watchable, and compelling is debatable, but I don't really love it. And that's 3 times watching it. And as I say, the first time we saw it in a theater in New York, I couldn't stay awake. That might be partly the movie's fault. Tree of Life did the same thing to me. I've never seen that a second time. I was fighting sleep so hard. Maybe that's not the movie's fault, but if the movie was really truly engaging, I might have fought the sleep off and not actually dozed off. Same with this.
I don't love Tree of Life at all. I should probably see it a second time. It just really didn't get to me. Similar thing where it's an abstract film that relies very heavily on images to set a tone rather than tell a story. The story in Under the Skin is incredibly thin. There's not really that much going on, and a lot of it is just seeing the world through her perspective. I find it a really fascinating approach to film, that we're seeing the world through an alien's point of view, and he nails it. It is an incredible experience. It's not the most beautiful parts of Glasgow, but her walking down the street and looking at people or shopping in stores and everything seems so brand new through her eyes right from the beginning of the film, because it opens with that incredible sequence, which I would describe as a birth sequence. She's learning to speak. We kind of see these abstract images. We are not meant to make sense of it. He said that he wanted to stay away from anything that seemed like prototypical alien. He was like, I wanted to not be alien stuff in the way that Hollywood typically shows. He goes, I wanted it to actually seem alien and that our human minds couldn't necessarily make sense of what we were seeing. So that's why there's just shapes and lights and sounds and
odd music, of course.
I actually thought about this when I was doing my research and notes for this film, that I have to stop saying that I don't like score, because I think I'm just very picky about score. I think that I just have a really strong
but something
opinions
like this makes the movie
score.
that much better.
This score, oh my God, this movie would not be the same without this score. So the score, these sets, a white void, a black void, they don't make sense to our brains, but nor would anything legitimately alien coming to our world with alien technology. Chances are we wouldn't be able to make sense of it. So he puts us in that place, and then he takes her and immediately puts her in the most plain-looking shopping mall with all these actual real people that didn't know that they were being filmed.
Partly because she was wearing a crappy wig. As hot as she is, she doesn't look all that great in this movie because of that wig.
Yeah, and because, like I was saying, the camera refuses to objectify her. If she has a clumsy moment in those terrible shoes, walking in gravel in those heels, no normal woman would ever do that. She has this really ungainly walk at times. The camera just shows it, and those ugly clothes. But I have such
She chose them.
I have such a fascination, actually, with her wardrobe. They make a big point of showing her taking perfectly good clothes that she's wearing, but then going shopping and replacing them with this objectively worse outfit.
Clothes that she
makeup.
takes off of the woman that they have at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, like, why bother doing that? I guess just for the sake of going shopping and picking something else. This creature doesn't have a personality. She doesn't have any mission or goals or feelings outside of her purpose, which is to hunt men.
And
right?
turn them into food.
And turn them into food. She has a purpose, and she fulfills it until she doesn't, and then there's consequences. But for the first half of the film, there's really no indication that she would have a preference of what coat she wears. But she picks this ugly fake fur coat, these terrible acid wash jeggings, and those shoes, and she looks cheap. She looks like a streetwalker in winter.
Yeah. If
she was just walking around in the right neighborhood at the right time, people would think she was a hooker. And maybe the point is that's the kind of girl that gets the attention of the kind of men who will go home with a girl with very little provocation. If you're trying to get the kind of guy who's not going to ask that many questions and just come home with you, then maybe you do want to look like a hooker, and a cheap hooker at that.
Most of the cast never acted before, so quote-unquote cast, other than her, of course, and most people didn't even recognize that it was her because she's in Scotland and she's driving the van, although I guess they had the equipment on it, but anyway, and she doesn't look like
the cameras were all
herself,
hidden.
Really. Well, I read that she was driving sometimes a trailer behind.
Oh, okay, but I'm sure in the scenes where she's interacting.
Those guys apparently were real. Adam Pearson must have been.
No, he's an actor. He got
And
cast.
also, did you notice in the scene with him, she says more to him in whatever length of time that is. I don't know if it's even 5 minutes than she does in maybe the entire rest of the film. She talks to him, by her standards, a lot. So the deformed man, just so we're clear about that.
Yes.
That's what it says in the credits, the deformed man.
Yeah. Because he is deformed. I think he would describe himself as deformed or disfigured. He has, I wrote it down.
It's funny how his entire body...
Neurofibromatosis.
Right. We see his whole body because he's fully naked for a little while, and nothing else in his body is in any way different than you and I.
And apparently that's
It's just his head.
How this disorder presents differently in every single person. This is just the odd way that it presented in his body. He has an identical twin brother.
Oh, really?
Who doesn't have any deformities on his face. I looked him up. I was fascinated because I find his performance beautiful. This is the difference it makes when you cast somebody who's actually deformed instead of casting an actor and putting like a whole pile of makeup on them so everybody shrugs their shoulders and goes, okay, yeah, well, I know it's Colin Farrell underneath that mask or whatever. And that scene with the two of them meeting and driving together, it gets me every time. It's so well written. At this point, she's already started to wake up from whatever you want to call it, but she's started to interact with the world around her.
She's
in a different
questioning
way.
what she's doing.
Yeah. There's the scene where she gets the flower And she sees that it's covered in blood because the guy who gave them the rose has a cut up hand. And she's looking at the blood, and you can see that things start to connect. What is this feeling? Well, it's empathy. She's living among humans, and she's starting to feel like a human. And you see over and over in reviews and analysis of this film that this is fundamentally a film about how empathy is the key to humanity. So when she meets the deformed man, they say so much. This is a beautiful moment of her performance, too. She treats him exactly like she treats all of her other victims. There's not 1 ounce of pity in her kindness to him. She knows enough not to compliment his face. She compliments his hands. But she seems like she really means it. It's this believable thing. Oh, there's a beautiful shot where he pinches himself because he's like, I must be dreaming. He strikes me as a lonely man.
He's very shy, for sure.
And, of course, that's the moment when she actually turns around and abandons her life.
He's the TSN turning point.
So I thought it was that she was looking in a mirror after he gets submerged into the void.
I thought so too.
But it's not a mirror. She can see her reflection, but it's a window into the void. So she can see herself, but she can also see him floating around in there. And she lets him go, and he gets captured by the motorcycle man and dies anyway.
He's kidnapped and put in the trunk, and then we don't see what happened, but I guess he does
think we
die.
can assume we know what happened.
Yeah, you don't need to see exactly
But
what
then
happens.
she goes on to try to live as a human,
Just like leaving that guy that she would have had normal sex with until she realizes, I don't have genitalia. We never see her leave the guy. She investigates her crotch, and then as I recall, the cut is just she's walking alone, and we never see that dude again. So we don't know what she said to him to leave. I don't think he would have tried to make her stay. He doesn't seem like the kind of person that would do that. But she seemed to like this guy. This was going fine. This was going well. If she's ever going to try to amalgamate herself as a human being, or not, maybe blend in as a human being, maybe this is her chance. And then she realizes, oh, I guess I can't do that. And we don't see the end of that relationship. And maybe that's a smart thing. And by the way, there are a lot more things in the book by Michael Faber. Where's my note about that? Michael Faber. His novel in 2000 it came out was far less ambiguous than this is about some of these things, including what's going on with them going into that abyss type deal. Okay, so ScarJo. We've covered her 6 times. Ghost World, The Man Who Wasn't There, Lost in Translation, Her, and Jojo Rabbit. She's terrific in Her just as a voice, and we loved her in Jojo Rabbit as well. I don't think she's bad in this. I'm not saying that at all. There's nothing wrong with the performance, but I wonder why I'm not grabbed by this. And when I read that among the names they considered for this were Eva Green and Gemma Arterton. Am I saying that right? Gemma, I think, not Gemma. Those 2 actresses fascinate me anyway. Well, I'm not Arterton, but I've seen Eva Green naked many times, so that wouldn't be anything. It would be great to see, but we've seen it many times. ScarJo, it's unusual. But I think I would like to have seen Eva Green or Gemma Arterton in this more than Scarlett Johansson. I feel like it might have been a better bit of casting. ScarJo just put on a Scottish accent or English accent? I think it's English accent. And Green and Arterton, I believe, are both from that part of the world, so they've just talked like themselves, I guess. But then this movie got made partly because you get the big name actress in this, especially when you've got nobody else that anyone recognizes, and this weird concept made by a guy that not many people know. So that's one reason why you go with Scarlett Johansson. So she's fine. But I guess when I read that, that was what it was. I'm trying to figure out, doing my research, why don't I feel as invested in this movie as you do?
You truly blame her performance?
I don't blame it. I just think when I see those names, that to me is what I would have liked to have seen even more.
Oh, I think her performance is perfect. I wouldn't change anything about it.
Okay.
It's hard to imagine anybody else doing this. And he did want to go with an unknown. Like everybody else in the movie is an unknown. Many of them weren't even
They still
cast.
are unknown. They haven't acted anything else.
No, they weren't even actors. They were just people that happened to be around that she tried to lure
But
in the van as
sometimes
an actor.
that happens and then they become an actor and do at least 3 other things.
Sure.
Most of these people never did anything else after this, and it's been a decade.
Not a thriving film industry in Glasgow, I presume.
Maybe that's part of it. Yeah.
But of course, he said realistically he was never going to get the film made if he didn't have at least 1 star. So he kind of liked the idea of just putting this costume on her. Nobody would expect Scarlett Johansson to have this bad wig and to be wearing these cheap clothes and driving a big white panel van. It's just so out of context. And for her to be in this city in Scotland with no cameras around her behaving the way she does, probably a lot of people said, I saw this girl. I could have sworn for a second it was Scarlett Johansson.
I don't know. I think wigs can really throw, or just different hair can really throw people off. Just like sunglasses throw me off. There are times I'll see people that I know and not be certain who I'm looking at. I can't recognize sometimes when people do wear the baseball cap, the sunglasses, or if they have a wig on. I think they look so much different a lot of the time. And you're right. She wouldn't be expected to be there. And she sounds different because she has an accent she doesn't normally have.
Yes. I loved her in Jojo Rabbit. I love her in Marriage Story. But I do find, for the most part, she's like a bit of a robot. She naturally has this really unaffected style of performance that can seem so low-key that it's almost like there's nothing going on. So her style of acting is perfect for this as well.
I like her in those movies we talked about, and we've covered her 6 times, but I don't know if I think of her as a must-see actress, though.
I agree. I could definitely give or take her.
But in her, that might be one of the great voiceover performances I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So kudos for that. Anyway, maybe that makes sense, though, in a movie that's this odd and everything, and the storyline's fairly simple. Alien kidnaps in a way, but seduces men to go back to her place and then effectively kills them. We've seen that when people use a knife or a gun or hang them or whatever it might be. Usually it's men doing it to women or men doing it to men, but here it's a woman doing it to men with the motorcycle guy's assistance. And he's not giving up on the mission like she is towards the end of the film. He's got assistants out looking for her. And the last shot is of him watching her burning up. I don't know if he knows that's what's happening, but I think the movie's saying that he does. And now I guess he's got to go find someone else to do this. So I have a what happens next, by the way, for that. The motorcycle man has to take over as the seducer, and we get to think about him naked on a repeated basis. And yes, he'll seduce dudes, not women, just to freak out the homophobes. And make this movie even more of a failure, probably with most people.
Glazer said from the beginning he didn't really want to make this film about gender, but he accidentally did make it about gender, because how can you avoid thinking about gender?
If she kidnapped women, it would be easier to say that, but she never does. She never even talks to women.
Yeah. We live in a world where the pursuit of intimacy is dangerous for women across the board all the time. We are taught to always approach men with suspicion, and in Under the Skin, it's the opposite. It's the men that should be paranoid, but they're absolutely guileless in a way that women never would be. There's a reason why they get a girl to hunt men instead of the other way around, because women, it would be so much harder to convince them to go anywhere with you. It's a rare sight to see a story where there are men who are being punished for lust, for promiscuity. Yeah. Usually, again, that's the other way around. But here, it's a surprising thing to see. When you see those guys just confidently naked marching into that abyss, sinking into that tar-like fluid, it's not that hard to believe. Of course, there's got to be something else going on, and the movie doesn't over-explain.
Yeah, maybe they're hypnotized or something like that.
Yeah, at that point, they're hypnotized. But even going into this strange house in the middle of nowhere, this dilapidated house, you're like, nobody has any questions, eh?
A completely black room, and she's walking what seems to be on some kind of surface, and then they are too, and they don't seem to ever really object to the fact that, oh, I'm sinking. Maybe they think they're going to have pool sex. I don't know if that's supposed to be. But I guess that could be a nutshell for the movie, too. Men will do anything to have, or think that they're going to have sex.
Yeah.
Can I sleep with this woman with these great boobs and this great body up here? Okay, whatever. You want me to go into the water? Oh, wait, I'm never going to come out again? I'm going to die? All right, well, it was worth a try.
Although that said, as beautiful as Scarlett Johansson is, the movie does take care to show lots of men not falling for it. Her trying and failing over and over again, including the beach scene. She initially is trying to talk to that guy, and he's just not having it. He does not want to talk to her. He doesn't really want to answer her questions. Yeah. He kind of thinks she's nosy and weird or something. For whatever reason, he's not interested in her at all. And then that leads into...
Now, that I said about the great scenes about at the end when she peels her own face off and we see under the skin. But that is an incredibly memorable scene, too.
Because it's traumatizing.
If we were parents, that could be twice as traumatizing, too, that baby's just left there, probably to drown, to be pulled out by the surf and then to drown.
Well, we hear them talk about it on the radio later. And
they don't mention the baby, do they? Which would mean
they say the baby's presumed dead. They say the baby's also missing and presumed dead. It would be so easy to save that baby, pick him up, put him somewhere where somebody else is going to find him, but they don't care because it's irrelevant to them. In the beginning of the film, when she gets that first outfit on, she's in the white void, and she seems to have absolutely no curiosity or interest in the woman that she's undressing.
Who has a single tear come out of her face, so she's not dead yet.
And we don't know, is she a person or is she the last alien?
Good point.
The same broken machine that she becomes, that Johansson becomes. But she has no interest in this person at all. She's just like a lump of flesh. But she's incredibly interested in the ant crawling on her. And then we get these close-ups of her observation of this ant, which I guess is the first living earth creature that she ever encounters. But it also likens the way that we as humans could watch a praying mantis eat her lover alive and just watch it with this cold, impassioned curiosity, the same way that she watches humans drowning, first trying to save the dog and then trying to save his wife. And then this guy trying to save both of them.
What about the dog?
They're all gone. They're all dead. And she's watching this act of compassion, which certainly must influence her later on when she's coming to realize her own compassion that's budding in her. But at the time she's watching this, she's coldly observing it, learning about people the same way we would if we were watching bugs or like any number of wild animals.
And the bug's baby being left there crying. Well,
Yeah,
what do
we
care?
wouldn't even think about it. We would just walk past it. Oh, we just got to clean up this towel. There's a baby, and not my problem.
She leaves the baby there, and so does the motorcycle man when he comes to pick up the swimmer's clothes. He's a Czech swimmer, by the way. He tries to help them, and he's exhausted. I think he's laying face down, and she just picks up a rock and goes, bam. Now, that's ironic because she never kills anybody else before she gets them back to that house. And maybe he isn't dead, but he's at least badly injured, you would think, by doing something like that to the guy. So that's a strange choice to make for this character. But yeah, that baby being left in the surf at that point, and then when the motorcycle man comes back to pick up the clothes, it's dusk, it's almost dark, and the water is starting to get closer and closer.
Yeah.
I'm sure the baby wasn't in any danger of drowning.
Babies cry without any good reason all the time.
But the way they played this off is just so cold and so perfect. And I can see why a parent would be so traumatized to watch that scene.
And to come back to the insect thing, when she has that moment where she's looking into the mirror, but it's really looking into the void, looking at the deformed man, and she's having this come to Jesus moment. I guess it wouldn't be come to Jesus, but you know what I mean.
Come to Mork moment?
Come to Mork moment.
Orson?
The next thing she sees that gets her attention
E.T. moment?
is a fly trying to get out, banging up against the window. And she looks at the fly, trying to get out, and the next thing you see is the door opening. So at first you think, oh, she's trying to let the fly out. And then you see that man's naked feet. So she releases the fly. She releases the man. She has compassion.
Compassion is what gets her killed in the end, I guess, too, because of what happens at the very end, which we'll get back to in a minute.
I think she would have died anyway. She's starving. I read about the score that part of the sounds are supposed to be her state of mind, and there was a specific sound for her hunger. She can't eat the cake. She doesn't eat the food that her friend serves her. And she would be getting hungry. And maybe the reason her skin falls off when she gets attacked by the logger
She's falling apart.
is because she's falling apart.
That's a good point, because that whole sluice trough thing, I guess you could say it's fairly clear by this movie's standards what goes on there. But that's when the guy who very clearly has an erection, I don't know if they all do, but he does for sure. He sinks in the liquid, at least the second time we see somebody do this, and he sees the swimmer who's under there.
Oh, this scene.
And then the guy, I put the word implodes. I don't know if you'd even call what happens to him imploding, but...
It's like he liquefies instantly.
And it's just his skin left.
Yes.
Like this husk, it's floating around.
Floating around.
Like a blanket or your sheets or something like that. They're in the ocean.
Almost likens to the plastic bag in the wind in American Beauty. It's completely helpless against the currents.
But the next shot is an unusual looking, not a clear shot, but you can tell what it is. A sluice trough with the meat. I guess it's his insides. I don't know how that happened, but there they are.
And in the book, that makes it explicitly clear that they are hunting for food.
Right, and she's given up this life doing this, so yeah, I can see why she's starving, as you said. And by the way, not being able to eat the food, human food, reminded me of David in AI. I think I said that to you during the screening. When he tries to eat the broccoli early on, I don't know if he ever tries to eat again, but he short circuits because he can't eat food. They can't eat food fine. You think water would be a problem too. How do they not get water in their bodies when they're just doing their things with their people and it rains? If they ever turned up their mouth or their nose, how do they not get water in there? And that messes them up as much as broccoli would. Or asparagus, or whatever he's eating in that scene.
I don't know.
It's like signs. There's water in the air, and the aliens come to the planet in signs.
But it's funny, ironically, he ends up underwater in that submersible for, 1,000 years?
Right. Well, nobody's inside the thing, so he's not underwater.
But I just mean thematically.
Yeah, right. So what about the ending, though? Because ScarJo's with that guy, and things go fine, but she doesn't have genitalia, and she walks away. We don't know what happens with him. She runs in the woods, and we see a phallic logging truck. I thought that was important and interesting because of what's about to happen to her. Now this succubus, this villain of the movie, really, even though she's the main character.
Hunter becomes the hunted.
But she's very hunted by this guy who chases her, and then she ends up in a bothy, which is a shelter. I think that's a Scottish thing, Bothy. I wrote it down, so I think that's accurate. Also, there's ominous wind in the trees and this whole big setup. We haven't seen nature quite like this, I don't think, through most of the movie. Yeah, we saw the water scene, but now she's
getting close. She starts in the city. She keeps getting more and more in nature. There's this shot of her asleep on her side, superimposed on this big, beautiful wide shot of the forest. The implication is strong that she's joining nature, becoming one with nature, but then she's attacked by a man. There is also this dichotomy throughout the film of kind men and really bad men. There's the best of humanity and the worst of humanity, and this man is the worst of humanity. He attacks her, and then he chases her. And then there's like a actually pretty hard to watch rape scene doesn't actually successfully rape her, but he overpowers her. She just goes limp and she looks like she's dissociating and she's not looking at him. She's not fighting him anymore. She just starts staring at the sky, which is the freeze instinct that you hear a lot of women describe when they're being attacked.
When the camera shows the snow falling, I could see a woman dealing with that. But if it was an actual woman, not an alien.
Look at the snow. Mm-hmm. Oh, she's leaving her body. And then moments later, she actually leaves her body, right? Because she steps out of the skin that she's in. So this moment of trauma response ends up physically manifested in what happens to her next. Now, this is something that I thought of watching this movie for the third time. Did Jonathan Glazer mean this? Probably not. But it's the nature of the movie that you really could interpret it differently every time you watch it. Every person could see something of their own in it. But when you have a movie that's visually rich and vague, then...
Why do you think that he wouldn't have been going for that?
I'm not a victim of sexual assault, but I did feel like it was something that brought my own impressions and...
But we had the same basic feeling about it, and I'm a guy.
That she was dissociating and leaving her body in that moment.
I said to you when the camera shows the snow coming down, that felt like a very human moment.
Then I guess what I mean is the metaphor that then she literally walks out of her body. Her skin comes off.
This is also something that this character, this alien, doesn't understand. He can't actually penetrate her, as we know from whatever that was, 5 minutes ago when she was still with the guy that she liked. She would have been fine with having sex with him, I think, but then realizes there's nothing down there, is there?
Yeah, she's disappointed. She throws the lamp away and she realizes what's happening.
So he can't penetrate her anyway.
She's upset about it.
The logger can't, I mean. Well, neither can the friend. Or the
No, but he never gets that far because he starts tearing off her
So
skin.
she probably doesn't understand what this logger's doing anyway.
I think she understands perfectly. She knows what sex is because she was going to have sex with the other guy.
Oh, true, yeah.
And she's luring men with sex. She must have some kind of understanding of it.
But I think that could be another subtext behind, let's say somebody has learning disabilities. And then, especially if they're young, right? They haven't really lived any kind of life yet. And then a father figure or whoever tries to do that to them, and then they don't understand what's going on. Why are you touching these body parts?
She didn't understand it was violent. She understood that she should be scared of him.
But we're looking at deeper things here, and I think what I'm saying could apply to what Glazer's going for as well.
He leaves it so intentionally unspecific, right?
And when she peels off the skin, and then the head, well, at least the face comes off, and now a black body, and this is another actress that played, who is it again? I'll write down not write down, but say the name of the actress. It was Jessica Mance, who portrays the female in her alien form. So that's her playing the character then. And then however they did it, the visual effect of Scarlett Johansson blinking eyes, so it would have been her somehow, visual effect-wise. She's now looking at her own face. And then the guy comes back with the gas, lights her on fire, and she's done. And the bad man, the motorcycle man's bad man in the credits, is watching this. Does he feel like that's a sense of completion? I got to find somebody else now? In a lot of ways, he's the real villain in this whole thing because she just wants to live her life. The Scarlett Johansson character does. But the Jeremy McWilliams character, the motorcycle guy, has a role to play, has all these assistants, and I think it's going to continue on. I was joking about him being the one that would do this stuff, but he's probably got to find another person. Maybe it was a human being that he's turned into an alien to do this. Maybe she was just a prisoner of his. And now theirs.
Yeah, possibly. Well, like I said, I think she's born at the beginning of the film. They have the scene that I interpret to be a birth scene.
Yeah.
So she could be created strictly for this purpose. She seems to be like a newborn in many ways, and that she has no personality. And maybe some of the implication, too, is she has no empathy because our baby's born with empathy. Maybe they have to see the world and experience the world to start to properly experience empathy and compassion and become full-fledged humans. And maybe he goes through this process over and over again. Like you said, that first woman at the beginning who's dead or not dead, she cries a single tear. Maybe she was the previous one.
He could have had dozens of these.
And it's funny, they have this ominous threat of the bad man on the motorcycle chasing her through the second half of the film. And it keeps cutting back to him and the whine of his motorcycle whipping down those roads. And the score always makes sure that you know this is scary. But it never pays off.
Yeah, he's coming, but he's never actually finding her.
Yeah, it's just this logger that takes her out.
Except he sees what does happen. Presumably he knows what that is. You could say he's a long way away, but an alien might have vision or some kind of sense that we don't have that would be absolutely clear. That's the Scarlett Johansson, whatever he would think her name is, now burning. Maybe not dead, though. It's an alien. Maybe it's not actually dead. The movie does seem to be saying
I think that she's
dead,
yeah.
Right. And he's got another job to do.
Ended, yeah.
He's going to move on.
Apparently in the book there's a male character, and initially Glazer wanted to have a man and a woman.
Brad Pitt
was talking about doing it. And then he was like, no, the movie's just about her. He worded it so lovely. He goes, the best machine is the one with the least moving parts. So he said that he started with the script being really similar to the novel, and then he just kept whittling it down to like its bare bones necessities of how do you tell this story? How do you create this mood with as little plot as possible?
If I said, by the way, Michael Faber earlier, I guess it's Michel Faber.
Oh,
so
okay.
Or Faber, maybe. Michel, not Michael.
So I was thinking about how different this movie would be if it was a man doing this. Would we have forgiven his actions in the first half of the film? We forgive her so easily for
You're right. She is the villain.
Gruesome stuff
That's
that
right.
she does.
She's done awful things,
Yeah.
and now she's paying the price, and yet we feel bad for her. It's a strange touch, the way
Yes.
this movie makes you care about her
And
enough.
it does. It works 100%.
You feel
There's no
hollow.
part of me that feels conflicted about that. As soon as she changes her mind, I'm 100% on her side. Would it have been that easy for me to forgive a man's actions, but at the same way, would it feel less tragic if it was a man dying at the end? Would you be rooting for him to get that autonomy and independence and become his own person and have his own realization? Would that be something that would be easier to root for in a man than it is in a woman? It's a story we're not as familiar with, coming from a female character as a male character.
Especially one without really any emotions until maybe and even that, not really at the end of the film is there much in the way of emotion. When the body is falling off and she's looking at her own face, it's not like there's a sense of a
No
tear
expression.
coming down.
Yeah.
Well, the black character can't have that. The black body can't have that, I guess. But it's not like the Scarlett Johansson face is looking up thinking, oh my God, it's over. There's no real expression. Glazer, with his hidden camera in this movie and making such a different film than his other ones have been so far, he does different things every time. Sexy Beast, Birth, The Zone of Interest are his 4 films. Well, this, of course, was the third of the 4.
And he had an incredible music video career as well.
Yeah.
He directed the video for Virtual Insanity, considered one of the greatest music videos of the 90s. Karma Police is another one. He did a lot of Radiohead stuff.
He wrote with Walter Campbell, who's only ever written this one film, but is an executive producer on this movie. Glazer, of his 4 films, has written all of them except Sexy Beast. Someone else wrote that. The producers were Nick Wexler and James Wilson. Wilson produced Zone of Interest as well. Wexler produced The Player, which we covered a couple years ago, recently anyway, and was an executive producer on Requiem for a Dream and 25th Hour. So one of those movies is also quite weird, Requiem for a Dream, with Aronofsky. But he's producing very good films. We liked, I think, all of those movies. The film's 185-1. We watched our Blu-ray. Looked pretty good. It's also available on Netflix, or it was a week or two ago. So by the time we post this on the 23rd, maybe it won't be anymore. Cinematographer Daniel Landon shot a lot of music videos. Fittingly, I didn't look up if that was for Glazer, but maybe he did work with him. But I don't recognize his film titles. I don't think any of them. The editor, Paul Watts. This movie's editing was good. Maybe not Oscar-worthy, but good. This is his first film with Glazer, but went on to edit The Zone of Interest. And we already raved about the score, which maybe should have been nominated, and the sound design. Mika, I guess, M-I-C-A, a woman. Levy, so Mika Levy, also did the music for The Zone of Interest, which I believe was also pretty great. And she got an Oscar nomination between these movies, this one and Zone of Interest, for the Jackie score. My husband was murdered. We did not like Jackie.
We did not like that movie.
So the technicals, I guess you've already talked about them. They're very good, of course. They're award-worthy and 2001-esque or Kubrick-esque. I think Lynch-esque as well. You agree? What else do you
Yeah,
say?
100% agree. He made so many interesting choices. but-
Interesting in a good way, not in a...
Interesting in a good
yes,
way.
that was interesting. I didn't like it.
But I still feel like there's such a seamless quality and like consistent tone. It's beautiful.
All right, then, last thoughts on Under the Skin.
What better compliment could there be for a movie like this than the observation that someone could have been listening to this and thinking that our interpretation was completely different from theirs.
That would be interesting.
Right? What are they talking about?
Interesting in a
Gender,
good way.
the nature of humanity? This film's clearly about capitalism and nature. And they would be right. because-
Sexual assault.
Yeah. I think it could really reach each individual in a powerful and specific way. And I could watch this film 20 years from now and see something totally different from what I see now. And I would be right. So I just adore this film. Hard to recommend to people, though, because it's super weird.
Most friends we have,
we would
they're not
never
gonna
tell
watch
them to
this.
watch it.
They wouldn't want to watch
I should
it.
add, this is a very Bev film for sure.
Yeah, our waitress asked us what we were doing one night. We didn't watch this that night, but we thought about making it anyway. And she didn't know what we were talking about, and she was being polite. She probably thought, what in the hell is that?
And she's like, I like weird movies. And she had never heard of Zone of Interest. And I was like, if you've never heard of Zone of Interest, chances
It was
are
pretty
you don't like
zeitgeisty.
movies this weird. Yeah. That's why you said, what was it, 53% audience rating on
And it
Rotten
bombed
Tomatoes?
with the 55, and it bombed with the audiences. So this is a movie in the modern era that wasn't liked by audiences in any way, and yet look how respected it is by critics and awards bodies and things. And I think it's getting to be more so as it goes along.
I think it's going to climb the Sight and Sound list.
Probably
I really do.
will.
Or it'll get usurped by Zone of Interest, because Zone of Interest is also experimental, brave, and an important subject that critics love.
Yeah.
I think that Under the Skin is a better movie, but you would disagree.
I like Zone of Interest more.
Yeah.
And I'll end by saying this.
We have to tell Chef his wife's a succubus.
Alien succubus in Under the Skin. And that was how we saw Under the Skin. We'll be back in 7 days, and we'll do then what we did today by reviewing an unsettling and haunting film that came out in 2014, even if you can't really call it a horror movie either. We are almost in the month of October, which will be, as always, Scary Movie Month. Anyway, next week, it'll be the last day of September, and we'll be jamming about one of Jake Gyllenhaal's most unsettling performances in Nightcrawler. The coming attractions opinion question for Nightcrawler. Jake Gyllenhaal has been in many terrific movies, but I have a bit of an unusual question about his filmography. Of all the films he's made with a one-word title, such as Nightcrawler, one-word title, Enemy, and so on, right? And he's been in more than 15 movies with one-word titles. Which is your favorite?
All right. So for the answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about Nightcrawler. You already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite, subscribe wherever you listen. It's also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for you for free. And while you're there, leave us a rating and a review. It's a great way to support the podcast. You can also find us on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis, and we are both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. Or you can also reach us by email, haveyoueverseenpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget that if you like freshly roasted coffee, premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US.
As you're burning alive in a forest?
As you're burning alive in a forest, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
I have entirely too much skin. Time to peel it off.
And cut.